bid you all good morning, good evening, and good night, wherever you're watching this transmission. Let's spare a thought for those folks living in Canada and that are under this housing regime. They're under a housing regime that's actually displacing families, holding back people from getting married, holding back people from starting weddings, or having a wedding, or getting married, or settling down, having kids, and working, comfortably, 5-minute drive from home. A lot of people, a lot of families have been displaced over the last 10 years because of this destructive housing market. Well, who's to blame? Well, it looks like Better Dwelling has the answer here. We got a few articles here, so sit back, relax. And if you're an American, you probably think, what do I care about Canada and what's happening with their housing? You sit back, you relax, because it's going to happen there. Amerifornia will be coming. You guys are just several years behind because Trump was in front of this. Now you're going to see what's going to happen in the next couple of years with Amerifornia. So sit back, Americans. Australians already know the drill. So do New Zealanders and the UKers. They're in the same predicament that Canada is in. So here we go. This is what's going on. So here's the article right here. This is by Better Dwelling. How the Canadian government supersides budget inflate the property bubble. This is kind of important because it actually goes into very specifics. Now, it ties back to a specific article I read, I don't know, like 7 months ago. Now, a lot of people ask me, Mike, where's the article? Well, here's the article too, what I was talking about before, with the graph so you guys can understand what I'm saying. So there it is. This is a major issue, and it's affecting almost every person living in Canada. This housing is actually crippling and displacing people all over every English-speaking country of the world. This is the economic takeover that has been taking us over since 2010. Canadian real estate prices are rising at rates even the banks are warning about. So it's going up so fast. And it was last week's article that it rose 40 some odd percent in 1 month of the average person's wage. So if the average person makes, like say, $60,000 a year, 40% of that, say 30,000, about 28,000, 26,000 in 1 month. Housing went up. That's phenomenal. That's incredible. But it happened. There's a lot of reasons this is happening, but one rarely discussed is the supersized borrowing from the Government of Canada, GOC. A lot of cash was needed during the pandemic, but Canada's discretionary spending topped the G20. So we beat everybody else in the G20. There it is right there. Let me put on article scan so you guys can see what I'm talking about here. There it is. The Canada fiscal response to COVID top G20 countries. So there it is right there. And Canada ranks, obviously, number one, going into the most. There's Canada, Great Britain, United States of America, Britain, Italy, all the way down to Mexico and Turkey. And Turkey, that looks like it's in the plus there. But everybody spent more than they should. Canada's number one for it, right there. So, kind of wanted to show that to you guys so you know it's like legit. And this is from the National Bank of Canada from October 14, 2020. All right, so there it is. To help facilitate the spreading, the Bank of Canada, BOC, made use of the quantitative easing, QE. The unconventional policy tools used is debated, but its impact is well established. Keeping rates artificially low caused distortion in the areas of the economy. The longer and large the use of the program, the more distorted the markets become. So again, we've inflated this artificial bubble, and this artificial bubble has created artificial shortages and has left homeowners wealthy overnight, pretty much, but it's displaced. Now, people watching me 10 years ago laughing at me that were 15 and say, what a dork. This guy's talking about housing like it's, like it's not a big deal. What the hell is this guy talking about? Everything finds a correction. Well, a lot of these people 11 years later are 26, 27 now. And they're like, oh my God, how is this still going? So it's happening. And then I'll probably be talking about this in 10 more years from now. And it'd be the same song and dance story. They could let this go on for a long time. Your wages are going to be nowhere near. But something's going to have to happen or give somewhere, somehow. So government and debt quantitative easing, everybody knows what that is. But I wanted to talk about this. I specifically highlighted it because it actually pertains to what is happening specifically and it gets to the point right here. I can go on forever about market distortions from QE, but one of the biggest ones is mortgage credit, right there. Household debt. The GOC 5-year bonds directly influence the cost of the 5-year fixed mortgages, right? Now, that's why we've been watching what's happening in the bond market, specifically in the United States, because they're looking to reinflate or revigorate or re-energize the markets by raising rates, right? And the bond market might force them to do that. So we'll keep an eye on that, okay? Since lenders try to fund for as low as possible to make up in volume, so you're borrowing more, but you're paying less for it, right? So that's the problem, right? But the problem is you have more volume to pay. I would rather pay $160,000 and pay 13% interest on that, right? On my house. And I'd rather pay, $1,300 in or $13,000 in interest. At least I could pay the damn thing down in a good time limit, right? And this will put a fire under my butt and get me on it, right? So the 5-year bond, so we said that's since lenders try to fund for as low as possible to make up on volume, they drop to compete with the GOC. Mortgage lenders typically pay a small premium on the GOC bond rate as a slight risk premium. Okay, so you got to see, it's give or take, debt swap, buyback, kind of Canada's way of doing it, right? Like they do in the States. If the GOC rates fall, fixed mortgage rates for comparable time periods fall. Lower mortgage rates increase the amount of debt borrower can take on. Increased budgets allow a borrower to more easily absorb higher home prices in a hot market. But here's the problem. Then you're going to obviously look like you could leverage more. You could leverage more and you could borrow more because you have the capacity for it, right? Then you're going to be getting more credit cards because you qualify for it because rates went down. You're going to be getting more lines of credit, more Mickey Mouse you're going to get into, right? After all, if you don't have the money, you don't have the money. Prices can only rise as much as budgets will allow. What a well-written this is so well written here. If everyone has more money, well, buyers can compete to see who gives it to the seller. It's key to understand this isn't just a low interest rate problem either. It's beyond that. Low interest rates increase budgets. QE makes interest rates artificially lower than the market would naturally support. This makes budgets larger than the market can naturally support. So there it is right there. Causing huge distortions, large and persistent QE can make home prices rise faster than possible in any normal market. The other day on Twitter, a politician and investment banker both said, I was wrong about QE and mortgages. Rather than debating the issue with them like it's a big mystery, let's check out what the Bank of Canada, here's what they had to say. So this is what the Bank of Canada had to say. So pay attention. Government bond yields have a big influence on other borrowing rates. You see how they say that, on other borrowing rates. Lower yields make it cheaper to borrow money. So QE encourages households and businesses to borrow. So they're basically piling on more debt on top of more debt and paying back debt with debt. So the household income, so how are people, let me explain to you how people are paying back their debts with debt. They basically, a lot of people I've spoken to that did buy 2-3 years ago and their houses are skyrocketing. And because of this COVID fiasco, a lot of them actually had to borrow from their homes to live or to eat. That's the problem right there. So they're borrowing more debt to pay down more debt. Okay, I know one guy that took out $30,000 on his line of credit to kind of pay off his mortgage monthly for the year so that he doesn't fall behind on his mortgage, but he's using debt to pay off debt. So Canadians, household incomes, households that have a mortgage and have a second mortgage and a third mortgage or a line of credit are using debt to pay back debt. Even though their homes are going up in value, that's fantastic. But the problem is they're borrowing in their home and using their homes as ATM machines, like we said here, for years, and borrowing off that. And that's basically borrowing off debt to pay down more debt. I received an email from another guy in Toronto. He has a condo. He has a $13,000 line of credit, and he's been using that line of credit to eat because he can't afford to eat. But luckily, he put 40% down when he bought his condo. So his payment's not that high. He put 40% down, but he doesn't have money for food. But his condo went up in price. So now he's going to borrow from his condo, that chunk, that down payment he put down. It's almost like you're going against the current. Borrowing and borrowing more to pay off more with more borrowed money equals a cluster mess. Anyways, let's go back to what I'm saying here. So, okay, QE encourages households and businesses to borrow, spend, and invest. So we've been looking just before COVID. A lot of people weren't buying to invest in business, or they weren't borrowing huge amounts of money from their homes or second mortgages for any business. For very small fraction, it was all to eat, right? For example, number one, we can buy a 5-year government bond, which will lower their yield. This would reflect in lower interest rates on a 5-year fixed rate mortgages, making it cheaper to borrow to buy a house. And that's where, so here it is. So just how big was QE program annually? The Bank of Canada holds now $360 billion in government GOC bonds as of April 14, 2021. Yeah. National Bank of Canada, NBC, determined as of April the 9th, the Bank of Canada held about 40% of the GOC total outstanding bonds. The bank said it's taken just 1 year to radically transform the GOC bonds ownership. Bank of Canada ownership, government bonds. There it is right there. Now, what does this remind you of, guys? What does this remind you of? Oh no, did I get rid of it? No, it's right here. This video. There's the chart right there. You see right behind me there? That's the same chart. Those are the G7 countries at the bottom there, those little lines. Those are all the G7. And that little red line up top, let me go to full screen so you can see it a little bit better. So that little red line up top, right there, that right there is the same graph we're looking at. And that's why I said Canada's crashing now, sell now. And it wasn't crashing. I was dead wrong. Why? Because they kept pumping it up. This is from 6 months ago. That's the exact same graph that's right here. Prior to the pandemic, NBC says the Bank of Canada held much less. Their analysis found that the Bank of Canada held relatively stable 13% of bonds issued in the past. They also found that the Bank of Canada bought equivalent of 95% of new issuance between March 2020 and March 2021. The bank said this is an absorption rate that's really hard to overemphasize. It's also hard not to distort the market when you need to make a supersized budget affordable. So they're trying to make the borrowing affordable, right? Now, it goes on to right here. Regardless of whether the spending is justified or some of it frivolous waste, the point of QE exists, a lot of it. The artificially low rates spill beyond government spending into other areas like housing. That's great for the government and people refinancing, but not so much for buyers in a hot market. QE pulls forward demand and allows prices to grow faster than they naturally could. Artificially low interest rates are great for the government, but lead to the market distortions. The larger and longer the issue of QE, the worse the resulting efficiencies, especially in most of the credit growth, is a single area like residential mortgages. As QE tapers, the segments that saw distortion also tend to correct, bring them back to natural levels. However, sometimes markets are pushed to such an inefficiency it takes decades to fix. Now, I know what article this is already. There it is. Canadian property bubble nears seismic failure, and not even a big crash can fix it. So we're looking. So how long are we looking? So it says right here, it would take up to 26 years to save a down payment today. I actually was on Heisa says. I was actually wrong. I told him it was 22 years to save up for a down payment. I was wrong. It was actually 26 years. 307 months of savings Yeah, for a down payment. I was dead wrong on that. I'm really sorry. How long does it take to save a down payment if prices fall to 10%? And it could take about 108 months, 9 years for a down payment. So there it is right there. There's all the regions broken down in specific parts of Canada for you guys. Oakville, Ottawa. That's how long you have to save for a down payment in Oakville, Vancouver, Lower Mainland, Mississauga, Toronto, Fraser Valley, Hamilton, Victoria, Guelph. And then once you get to aggregate, I don't go below the aggregate. There's no point. This is right here is where it's blown out of proportion here. So that's from this video here that I made. And I thought markets were going to start because everything was out of control. And I was dead wrong. Dead wrong. Because the information tells us one thing and the governments do something else. So here it is here. We're getting this from Chilliwack. Now, this is a part of just outside of Vancouver, about 40 minutes outside, an hour outside of Vancouver. The Chilliwack Progress, Canadian housing prices fastest rising in the world. Relative to the year 2000, housing prices have risen by a factor more than 2.5. That's enormous, guys. According to figures appearing in The Economist, Canada led the group of 7 developed countries as measured by real housing prices starting from a base of 100 in its first quarter of 2000. Canadian housing prices have risen by a factor of excess 2.5. This is massive. This is not even a joke. This is not something to joke around with. Canada's home construction hits high records in March, record high in March. Canada's average home selling price also soared 31.6% year over year. That's crazy. See, Canadian housing stats rose 21.6% in March compared with the previous month, easily beating expectations and hitting a new record, data from Canadian Mortgages and Housing Corporation showed on Monday. Major issue here. Major issue we're looking at here. Now, here it is here. Canada's 2021 budget will likely have little impact on home prices. Now, their budget is, I think it's today or tomorrow. They're going to have a meeting on it. So I kind of wanted to throw this out there because we've been talking about money laundering on the channel. Beneficial ownership won't be arriving until 2025. So they want a different form of ownership, more transparency, right? Great news. If you've been money laundering in Canada, you have 4 years to clean up your holdings. One key point is bringing transparency to corporate ownership. Opaque ownership in Canada has made it difficult to figure out who the ultimate owner of a property is. Often the ultimate owner of a company that holds or funds the buy of the asset is unknown and not tracked. Canada plans to end that in the very distant future. But don't do that to the investors. That's going to screw up our housing market. It's going to screw up this massive bubble they threw together. It's going to ruin everything this house of cards they've built. But Washington State is now looking at actually becoming more transparent like this, because in Washington State in 2016, the tail end of 2016, when Vancouver put their foreign buyers tax, everyone went to Seattle and Toronto. The people that went to Seattle bought under corporate numbers, but they bought hundreds and thousands of units. Like, I'm not joking. That's why Seattle's sitting on around 36 to about 40,000 empty condos just in Seattle alone. So that's a lot. That's a lot to take in. That's a lot to, you know what I'm saying? Now, we've been talking about money laundering, and money laundering is massive here in Canada. And right here, Canada would be in a recession without money laundering. And it goes into here in 2011 to 2015. The Liberal government shut down the investigation, but they found $200 billion laundered in housing, and that's integrated layering, and a majority of it came from China. And we can't see this one here because soaring Canadian housing costs targeted with foreign owners tax. So there's a lot of, they're going to have to do a lot of figuring out here in Canada on where they're going to do with the housing, because if there's no housing and the middle class average workers can't get into the market, you don't have an economy. That's it. You don't have an economy if you can't have middle class into the market. Middle class can't get into the market. You could kiss the country's economy. The economy is based off artificial numbers, artificial balloons of everything, so artificially disproportionate towards wage. Everything needs to be within wages. But what? We targeted foreign wealthy investors. Who cares about the locals? That's right. That's what they did to us here in Canada. Anyways, guys, Look forward to reading your comments below. Look forward to what you have to say about this. This is a major issue if you're living in Canada. It's the Canadian blame game now, housing market blame game, because I think it's going to get worse than before it gets better. Mike Martins here. I have spoken.